Psachim Parak Beis Mishnah Aleph. We learned in the previous parak in Mishnah Hay that Ram Gamliel holds that for regular chametz it becomes usher at the end of the 4th hour. So if the day starts at 6 o'clock, at 10 o'clock already it's going to be usher. But chametz that's truma is mutter until the end of the 5th hour, which would be at 11 o'clock. So these halachas apply to eating chametz. The Mishnah discusses other forms of hana that you could have from chametz, as we spoke that chametz on Pesach and a certain knife is usher b'hana. So kol shosha mutter lechoil, as long as it's mutter to eat chametz, that's truma, which is until the end of the 5th hour. Machla behema lachai v'laoifis. One may feed any chametz, even if it's not truma, to animals, to beasts, wild animals, and birds. Umaycher lenachri, and sell it to a goy mutter b'anosoi, and he could still have hana from it. Over zmanoi, but once his time had passed, meaning after the zman, also b'anosoi, benefiting from it is forbidden. V'liyazik b'tana v'kirayim, and one may not fuel an oven or stove with it, even though a person is mechuyev to destroy his chametz at this time. He may not do so by burning it as fuel, since he could have hana from it. We saw a similar concept in Masechta Shabbos by burning truma as well. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ein bir chametz el sreifa." The mitzvah of removing chametz, destroying chametz, is fulfilled only through burning it. V'chachamim oimrim af mefar v'zer l'ruach emat l'yam. The chachamim say no, he may even crumble the chametz and scatter it in the wind or throw it into the water. According to the chachamim, the mitzvah can be fulfilled in any way. So what's the pshat in the machlekes? So the Rav explains from the Gemara, the yolef min noiser, the aser bahana v'anush kares kechametz. We learn it out from psukim by noiser. The noiser is aser bahana, and just like chametz has a chiyuv of kari, so too noiser is a chiyuv of kari. So mitzvah b'sreifa v'le b'davar acher. And we find that noiser has to get burnt, and there's no other way of destroying it. Rabbanan lo yalfi min noiser, but the Rabbanan don't learn it out from noiser. The chelev shel shar niskel yechiach. We could bring a raya from the chelev of a shar niskel she'aser b'achil b'hana v'anush kares ein nitzon shreifa. We have something else that doesn't need shreifa that's also aser, and would be most similar, where we see that it doesn't need shreifa, so it won't need shreifa. You can get rid of the chametz in other ways. Mishnah Beis, chametz shel nachri she'ovel of Pesach. Chametz that was owned by a goy during Pesach, mutter b'hana, is mutter to benefit from it after Pesach. Actually, the chametz of a goy may even be eaten after Pesach. The Mishnah says mutter b'hana, which usually means to be matter all types of hana except eating, in order to match the next statement to the Mishnah, which is asur b'hana, but really it's going to be mutter b'achila. V'shel Yisrael, b'chametz that was belonging to a yid during Pesach, asur b'hana, is shenemar le'yirah l'chal sa'ar. It's asur after Pesach because the pasuk says, it shall not be seen in your possession. Which means to say that the Torah asks a yid to have chametz in his reshus during Pesach, and the chachamim punished the people who violated this halacha by making their chametz aser even after Pesach. Mishnah Gimel, Nachri shehil ves Yisrael al chametzah. This Mishnah discusses the halacha of chametz that was used as a security for a loan. The first case is as follows: a yid borrowed money from a guy before Pesach and agreed to pay it back after Pesach. He deposited some chametz in the house of the guy before Pesach as a security, saying that if he doesn't repay the loan on time, the guy will own the chametz as payment for the halva retroactively from the time the loan was made. So nachri shehil ves Yisrael al chametzah. If a guy lent a Jew chametz before Pesach, relying on the yid's chametz, meaning that the yid left chametz as a security with the guy, achar Pesach mutter b'hana. The halacha is that if the yid doesn't repay the loan on time, the chametz is mutter b'hana after Pesach. Since the yid didn't pay on time, it became the property of the guy from before Pesach, so therefore it's going to be mutter after Pesach because it belonged to the guy over Pesach b'chlal. But if the case is in reverse, that if a yid lent chametz to a guy before Pesach, relying on the guy's chametz, meaning the guy left chametz as a security with the yid, so achar Pesach asur b'hana. The halacha is that if the guy fails to repay the loan on time, the chametz is asur b'hana after Pesach, because the mafreya, it became the property of the yid from before Pesach, so the yid actually owned it during Pesach, which is going to create it that it's going to be asur b'hana. Here too, the chametz must have been in the house of the lender, which is the yid in this case during Pesach. Only then would it be considered the chametz shel Yisrael. If the guy who's the borrower kept it in his house, the yid wouldn't become the owner until he collects it. Although they had agreed that the chametz would go into the reshus of the yid retroactively from before Pesach, that wouldn't work in this case because the guy cannot acquire something from a yid through the exchange of money alone. Mois einon koines. Rather, he must also take it into his rishus. Therefore, had it remained in the guy's house, it wouldn't belong to the Yid until he collected after Pesach, and it would be chametz that was owned by a Yid on Pesach. But if the Yid collected the chametz before Pesach by taking it into his house, he would indeed be koine l'mafreya, and would then be usher after Pesach. Next case, chametz and nafla of mapilas. Chametz which a wall collapsed over it and was buried under the pile of rubble, hareu k'mavur, it's as if it were destroyed and is no longer in the owner's possession. He's not mechuyev to dig out the chametz and destroy it. The Chachamim learn out from a pasuk in the Torah that if one owns chametz that cannot be removed except with great difficulty, he's not over on the isser of balira balimatz. Nevertheless, the Chachamim require the owner to be mevatel the chametz, because if he doesn't, and the chametz happens to be unearthed on Pesach, and he won't destroy it right away, he'll be over the isser deraisa of balira balimatz. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Kol she'ena kelev yochel chabitz achrav. The chametz is considered destroyed and no longer in the owner's possession, only if it's buried so deeply that a dog is unable to smell it and thus cannot search it and unearth it, and that shear would be at least 3 tvachim below the surface. If it was buried less than 3 tvachim deep, a dog might be able to sniff it out and unearth it, causing the owner to be over on balira balimatz. Mishnah Daled. Ha'echel trumas chametz b'pesach b'shegig. The Torah asks a zar, a non-kayin, to eat truma. Furthermore, one way to truma of a kayin has to pay for stealing it, and he has to pay the owner. And we explained in Masechta Trumas that the payment depends on whether he knew he was committing if he was being over and eating truma or not. If he did it b'mezid, he knew the food was truma and eating truma is aser, he pays the kayin just to what he took, like a regular gazlan. But if he did it b'shegeg, he must replace the truma. That means he must designate an equivalent amount of the same kind of produce plus a chaymesh as truma and give it to the kayin. So the Mishnah is going to discuss a case of halacha of a non-kayin zar who on Pesach ate chametz that is truma. So arichel trumas chametz b'pesach b'shegeg. One ate truma of chametz on Pesach by accident that he didn't know that he was violating the isra of eating truma. Mishal mekarim v'chaymesh. He must pay the principal plus 1/5. Although chametz is not worth anything on Pesach, since having enough from chametz is aser, he must still pay the kayin, because one who ate truma by mistake, b'shogeg, does not pay the value of what he ate, but the amount of what he ate. B'mezid, however, if he ate the truma knowingly, that he knew that he was being over the isra of eating truma, patur mitashlumin, he's parted from any kind of payment, because anyone who ate truma knowingly must pay the value of what he ate, and chametz on Pesach has no value, umidmei eitzim, and he's also parted from paying the value of the truma as firewood, which means to say like this: if the truma was tameh, which can't be used as firewood, which can normally be used as firewood, he doesn't even need to pay, even if it's firewood value, because the kohen would not have used it for that purpose in any event on Pesach, which is benefiting from chametz, when benefiting from chametz is asa. Mishnah Hey. The Mishnah now goes away from hilchas chametz and deals with hilchas matzah. Only matzah made from certain types of grain is fit and roi to be makayim the mitzvah of Leil HaSeder. These are the species with which a person will fulfill his chiyuv on Pesach. That is, one fulfills his chiyuv by eating matzah that was baked with flour of the following grains: chitim, v'sa'orim, wheat and barley, kusman is spelt, shifan is rye, and shibayla shual is oats. This is learned at a psukim in the Torah that only something that could become chametz can be used as matzah, but something that doesn't become chametz cannot be used as matzah. Not only that, but a person can fulfill his chiyuv with the mai, because the mai may be eaten by aniyim. And it's interesting because l'maisa matzah is called lechem oini. Now it doesn't mean that you are poor; it means that you're eating the bread of a poor person. But the mai has to be somebody who's actually poor, and we know that a person can be mafker migudi boy mafker nichsei. He could be mafker his achin. So if he did bittul chametz, he said lebatav leheve hefker ka'afar da'ara. And if he had chametz in his kelim, he could have been mafker that. So maybe he takal came only by selling his chametz. I'm just speaking this out. Obviously, this halacha l'maisa needs to be. You need to be ma'ayin a little better than this. With ma'aser rishon shenitel trumasa, with ma'aser rishon whose trumas ma'aser has been separated, which may be eaten by anybody. Ma'aser sheni v'hekdesh sheniftu, ma'aser sheni and hekdesh that you were paid already, which may also be eaten by anyone. But kahana b'chala b'truma, kahan can fulfill their obligation with chala and truma, both of which are mutter to eat. Avaleh tevel. Now with tevel, which is prohibited to everyone, meaning that no truma or ma'aser was taken off at all. Nor with ma'aser rishon whose truma was not separated, which is also asked to everyone, also has a similar din to tevel. Nor with ma'aser sheni outside Yerushalayim, or hektish that was not redeemed, because Ma'aser Sheni is usher outside Yerushalayim, and hektish is usher everywhere. Regarding the matzah of a carbon toida is accompanied by 4 sets of 10 loaves of bread, each set prepared in a different manner. 3 of these sets are forms of matzah. Rikike Nazir, which are certain matzah wafers that were rubbed by a Nazir. A Nazir we know is somebody who was makabel on himself that he's not going to cut his hair or to drink wine or anything coming from a grape or to be metame to mason. And when the end of his neder is over, he's required to bring several karbanos, including 20 matzahs. So if he made it lechatchila for Rikike Nazir, asan la'atzmai, if he made them for himself to bring for his carbon, and then he changed his mind, deciding that he wants to use them instead for the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach, ein yoytze behen. He may not fulfill his chiyuv with them because they're not protected from becoming chametz l'shem matzah's mitzvah. Also lim kabashuk yoytze behen. But if he made them to sell in the marketplace to whoever needs them for karbanos, and then keep the ones that he didn't sell for the mitzvah of matzah, yoytze behen, he may fulfill his obligation with them because they were protected. He did have shimor l'shem matzah. And that's okay. That's going to be fine. Mishnah Vav. Now we're going to discuss the chiyuv of maror. These are the vegetables with which a person can fulfill his chiyuv to eat maror on Pesach. With lettuce, although lettuce generally doesn't have a bitter taste, it's considered maror because when it's left in the ground for too long, the leaves become tough and bitter. So the Gemara says, "Ulshin are endives, with tamcha." Tamcha is accepted to understood as a type of horseradish. With charchavina is a certain type of thorny plant. Besides for being the general term for any herb with which the mitzvah can be fulfilled, the maror refers to a specific vegetable, which is a type of coriander, which is very bitter. So the Rab says, "Min kuzbartahu umar b'yoser." It's a certain type of coriander that's very bitter. You can fulfill your chiyuv with them, whether they're moist or dried out. Only the stalks are acceptable when dry. The leaves must be fresh and moist. But not if they're pickled in vinegar or cooked for so long that they're reduced to a mush, or even cooked normally. And they combine to make up the shir of a kizayis, which is the minimum one must eat to be yoytze l'chiyuv. And you can be yoytze l'chiyuv with the stalks, with vegetables, with mai, by ma'aserishin shenitl trumasai, as we explained in the previous Mishnah, ma'aser sheni v'hektish sheniftu, as we just explained in the previous Mishnah. Mishnah Zayin. Ein sheren es amorsan latana goyim. You may not soak bran, which is the outer layer of the grain kernel, in warm or cold water on Pesach for chickens to eat, because it might become chametz. Aval choltin. But you may scald bran in hot water, because the hot water prevents the formation of chametz. A woman may not soak bran in water to take with her to the bath, to rub on her skin to clean herself, because it might become chametz. But she may rub dry bran on her skin, because that won't become chametz. Now the chidush of this is, even if she's sweating, or from the heat of the bathhouse, because the schwitz doesn't cause the grain to become chametz. A person may not chew wheat kernels and place them on his wound to heal it on Pesach, because it might become chametz from his saliva. So it's interesting that sweat won't make it become chametz, but saliva would make it become chametz. Mishnah Ches. We may not add flour to charoises, which was a certain dip that contained vinegar and water. This charoises should not be confused with the charoises in which the maror is dipped during the Seder, as we'll see in Perek Yud, or to mustard, which is made from crushed mustard seeds and water, because the water in these mixtures might make the flour chametz. But if one did add flour to mustard, it can be eaten right away, because it doesn't become chametz right away. He must eat it immediately before the flour becomes chametz. The Mishnah refers here only to flour that was added to mustard. If flour was added to charoises, may not be eaten at all, but must be burned immediately, because it becomes chametz quickly, even within 18 minutes. Now, what's interesting is that some people don't. The Ashkenaz that don't eat kidneys on Pesach, we taka don't eat mustard. But in the times of the Mishnah, it was before the takon of kidneys, so then they were able to eat chardal on Pesach. Rameir Oyser, but Rameir asers one to eat it even immediately. According to Rameir, there's no difference between mustard and charoises. In both cases, there's concern that the flour will become chametz immediately. Ein mevashlan es ha-pesach lebemashkem lebemei peres. You will not boil a korban pesach in any liquids or in fruit juices. The Torah asks one to eat a korban pesach that was boiled in water. Al terchlu mimenu no uvashal mevushal b'mayim. You shall not eat it partially roasted or boiled at all in water. Although the pasuk mentions water, the Chacham understand it to include all other liquids as well, because it says boiled. Boiled means any type of boiling. The term mashkim over here refers to the liquids that make food capable of becoming tameh, yad shachadam, as we mentioned many times, yain dvash, shemen, cholov, tal, dam, and mayim. Food cannot become tameh unless it was first moistened by one of these liquids. The term mei peres includes other liquids that come from fruit that's not talking about in these cases. However, after roasting the korban Pesach, you may shmir these liquids on it or dip it into them. Meaning, once it's roasted, then you could dip it into it and eat it whatever you want. I'm not concerned that these liquids will overcome the flavor of the meat. Getting back to the Hilchos Chametz, the end of the parak, the water that's used by a baker to cool his hands when preparing dough for matzahs must be poured out, because there's bit of dough in the water that can become chametz. You must pour the water into a sloping surface, so it'll be quickly absorbed into the ground rather than collect in a puddle, which would allow the pieces of dough to become chametz.